This is a production of PBS Charlotte.
The following episode of Charlotte Cooks is brought to you by Central Piedmont Community College and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Chef Pamela Roberts, and I welcome you to my kitchen where today we are going to be making some fabulous dog treats for your furry friends. Hi there. Welcome to my kitchen today. I'm Chef Pamela Roberts, and today we are going to be making a fabulous treat for your furry friends. A lot of times we are concerned about the foods that we're giving our dogs just as much as the food we give ourselves. And so today I'm going to show you how to make some beautiful treats that are all natural ingredients that your dog can eat as many as they want to. And I'm going to show you some variations on this whole simple recipe as well, so you can have a great variety of dog treats for your friend. Before we get started on making our delicious doggy treats, we visited a veterinarian to discuss the dietary needs of our fantastic four-legged friends.
Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out?
As far as knowing how much to feed your dog, it's going to be important to check the label of whatever food that you are feeding, just because the calorie content can vary pretty widely across different brands. And so that should always be printed on any food bag or can or whatever you're feeding. If you don't see that information there, you can always call the company, and they should have a phone number or some kind of contact information on there. What we want to look for on the bag is something called an AAFCO statement. And so what that does is AAFCO is kind of an association that helps to dictate what laws are put in place regarding the food label. Things that you'll want to look for regarding an AAFCO statement are things like complete and balanced. And that just means that the food is, what I say, complete and balanced for different life stages of your dog. Another thing that you'll want to look for is, has the food gone through feeding trials? Sometimes they have and sometimes they haven't. We always say in general, it's better that they've gone through feeding trials, that they have actually done research, fed this food to dogs and kind of monitored their response to it, rather than just looking at the ingredients and making sure it meets certain levels, if that makes sense. Other things to look out for are foods that are toxic to dogs and cats. I think we're all familiar with chocolate kind of being a no-no for dogs. Other things kind of in that same vein, or anything with caffeine in it, we're not going to want to give dogs. So coffee, sometimes we'll have owners giving dogs tea bags, which has caffeine in it as well. So we'll want to avoid things like that. Another thing to avoid is onions and garlic. We can see that cause problems with the red blood cells, and we have a lot of different foods that may not have like intact onions or garlic in it, but are seasoned with onion powder or garlic powder, things like that. And so if you do want to kind of toss your dog some chicken, I would just take the skin off of it first, just in case it has been seasoned with something like that. Other maybe not so well known things that are toxic to dogs would be macadamia nuts. So I know I love like macadamia nut white chocolate chip cookies, and my dog will stare at me waiting for me to give him one, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. A big one is something called xylitol, which is an artificial sweetener, and it can be found in a lot of different foods and a lot of different human foods. And so that's something you always want to check the label of your foods for. It can be in things like yogurt, chewing gum is a really big one. And so we just want to make sure we avoid giving them things like that at all costs. If you are thinking of changing your dog's food, it's always important to gradually transition rather than just stop one food and start the next, just because it can cause a little bit of GI upset. And so what we typically say is around 5 to 7 days is how long you want to transition. Just kind of add a little bit of the new to the old until you're kind of eating exclusively the new. I think I've been seeing more often people wanting to go to raw diets for their pets, just because they kind of got this mentality that dogs and cats, they came from wild animals and that's what their ancestors ate and things like that. There's actually no scientific evidence about the benefit of raw diets, but there is a lot about the dangers of them. And so our concern with raw diets is bacterial contamination, intestinal pathogens, things like that. For the pet and even for the owner, we worry about food poisoning, improper handling or storage of the diet and things like that. And so I would recommend, if you are thinking thinking about going to a raw diet, or you currently have your pet on a raw diet, just talking to your veterinarian about your other dietary options, something that's safer for you and safer for your pet. With vegetarian diets, we can actually see some dogs thrive and do just fine on vegetarian or even vegan diets. Our only concern with those is making sure that they're nutritionally balanced. And so if you are thinking about doing it, I would definitely want you to consult with a veterinary nutritionist just to make sure that they're getting everything that they need in them. But dogs can actually do fine if it's done right. So you see a lot of clients come in who just want to be able to just cook their dog or their cat something. And we find with homemade diets, typically they can be a little more expensive and more time consuming than commercial diets, but it's kind of the same as with the vegetarian diet. As long as you consult a veterinary nutritionist and they give you the right information and you make sure it's balanced, then that will be fine for them. Normally we like dogs to have what we call an hourglass figure, so they should kind of have a little curve in their waist. If you see your dog is kind of going straight up and down, then there's maybe a little too much going on there. So that's a good way to kind of keep checking at home to make sure you're not feeding too much.
Who let the dogs out? Who let the dogs out?
On with the dog treats. First thing you're going to need are some dog bone cutters. These are really fun. You can get these online just about anywhere. You get a set and they have 4 different sizes in them, and they're all bone shaped because we all know dogs love bones. These little cutters will really come in handy. So what are we going to put in our dog treats? Some of the ingredients that we're going to use are things like whole wheat flour. We're going to use oatmeal. We're going to use bacon fat. We're going to use some parsley. Parsley is really good for a dog system. You know, I think sometimes when you're hanging around the house and you smell something in the air and everybody blames it on the dog, parsley will help that. It really will help that. So that's one of the reasons I include it, but it also gives the dog a nice dose of iron, so it's a good vitamin to put in there. I know people say I don't want to give my dog a particular kind of grain, dairy products, or whatever, but I'm going to go over after I make this dough and get some cut out, some things that you need to leave out of your dog biscuits. One of the things we're going to use, whole wheat flour. Just a regular, plain, everyday whole wheat flour. Now, when you're doing baking for like cookies and cakes and things like that, in Bake Shop, we're really concerned about accurate measurements. Dog treats, not so much, because we're not putting any leavening in them. They don't need to rise. They don't need to do a lot of different things that cookies and things like that do. So a rough 2 cups of flour will go into the bowl. The next thing we're going to add is oatmeal, but you want to make sure that the oatmeal is in the flaky part, okay? Because that's what's giving it some of our flavor. The next thing we're going to use is peanut butter. We're going to use regular old creamy peanut butter. I would not add peanuts to this. Why? Because they're going to be crunchy enough. When we bake off our biscuits, we're going to put them in the oven, and then we're going to let them sit overnight. And I'm going to go over this with you again later on, but we're going to put them in the oven and we're going to let them bake overnight. And what that's going to do is it's going to get that biscuit really, really hard. So if you've ever gone out and bought dog treats, I think you may have noticed how hard and crispy they are. And that's because when dogs eat those dog treats, a lot of times the action of eating the dog treat will help clean the dog's teeth and the dog's gums. And so it's really important that they do have some level of crunchiness to them instead of a soft cookie. Dogs will still eat it if it's soft. Dogs will eat just about anything. In fact, we get grossed out by the things that dogs eat most of the time. So we're going to anthropomorphize, that means humanize, our dog treats just a little bit, because we want them to taste good, we want them to smell good, and if we like them, the dogs will like them. But guys, don't eat these because they're not going to have any sugar, they're not going to have any salt in them, and if you tried to eat these, you'd go, look, look, look. I'll tell you a story about that in just a minute. So in addition to our cup of peanut butter, our 2 cups of flour, our 2 cups of whole wheat flour, we're going to add a cup of bacon fat, okay? And this is already measured out bacon fat, and I just been saving it and saving it and saving it. Usually, if you are buying bacon to make your dog treats with, 2 packages of bacon will give you 1 cup. If you needed to go out and find bacon fat somewhere, ask your favorite restaurant. If you go somewhere for breakfast, can y'all save me some bacon fat? And a lot of times it's thrown away, and I bet you if you ask nicely, especially if you're a good patron of the restaurant, they won't have any problem letting you have some of these extra bacon fats that they have. We're going to add some eggs to this mixture. 1 egg, 2 eggs. I'm going to start with 3 eggs. And if I need more eggs later on, I'll add them. It's a lot easier to add an egg than it is to go ahead and add more of the dry ingredients. I've got the eggs in here. Now, one of the things I'm going to add in here to make a little bit of color is some chopped parsley. You can take your fresh parsley and chop it up, and it doesn't have to be chopped up really fine. It doesn't have to be really small. It can be. This is beautifully chopped, so I'm just going to put about a cup of this in here. And it's for color, and like I said, it's going to give your dog a little bit of a nutrient element as well. Now, something else you can add. Chop up some of that bacon that you have just cooked, okay? Now, you save it for your BLTs, save it for your breakfast, save it for yourself if you want to, but if you want to give your dog a real treat, put a few bacon bits into this biscuit mix. Something else you can add to this are little kibbles. If you get dog food that has little kibbles in it, you can add some of those in there too. And I'm just going to throw some of these in here and crumble them up nicely. So it adds a nice little flavor, it gives some nutrition to the dog as well. Now you're just going to mix this all up. As I'm stirring this up, I see I need another egg in here, so I'm going to go ahead and put another one in here. I may need to use up to 6 eggs, but you want to make sure that the whole mixture holds together. That's what you're trying to do here. So let me mix this up for a minute. Okay, once your dog biscuit dough gets about this thick, you're going to want to get your hands in there. Just get your hands in there and give it a nice little knead and sprinkle a little flour on it if it gets sticky. And now we are going to take this dough, we're going to roll it out, and we're going to make our treats. You're going to want to take them and cut them out just like you do cookies, okay? Just like you do cookies. All right, so I'm going to take just a little bit of this dough. I'm going to ball it up because it's just easier to roll out. You actually get a lot of cookies from this recipe, a lot of cookies. So when you're rolling dough out, whether it's cookie dough or anything, flatten it out into a disc. It just makes it easier to start with. Dust your table or your cutting board, whatever you're using, with a little bit of flour, and take a rolling pin. And you're going to cut this stuff out. You're going to roll it to about maybe 1/4 inch thick. And you can see the oat flecks in here. It looks pretty because it has the parsley in there and the oatmeal flecks. And we got little bits of bacon in there. And so now we're going to take our cutters. You can choose any size. If you've got those pony-sized dogs, use the big cutter. You've got the little bitty Pomeranians, Chihuahuas, use the little bitty cutter. And everything else in between is all good. But you know what? A big dog would like a little biscuit, and a little dog would like a big biscuit just as much. Now, when you cut these out, one thing you have to make sure you do is push your hand down and wiggle it a little bit, because we've got parsley, we've got some bacon bits in there, and we want to make sure that we get everything cut, okay? And you notice on your cutters, you're going to have one end of your cutter that's rolled over and the one end that's not. Don't do it this way, folks, because this is the cutting end and this is the end you're supposed to push on. And if you happen to get a cutter that has sharp edges on both sides, then just put a towel on over it when you're cutting your biscuits out, okay? So when you get them all cut out, you're going to take a sheet pan that's lined with parchment paper. And why do you line it with parchment paper? Because it just makes it easier to get them off later, okay? You're going to pick up all your little scraps. You're going to use every little single bit of this. And if you destroy one of these little biscuits like I just did trying to get it up, you can use a bench scraper to help pick these things up, which is really a handy tool to have. You can use an offset spatula to pick these things up. And you want to use every bit of scrap that you can, because that way you don't have anything going to waste. And I do have to tell y'all, one time I was making these in my kitchen at home, and my husband, who is a wonderful cookie buff, he loves cookies, walks by, and I had stepped out of the kitchen for a moment, and I had the dough all laid out on the cutting board, and I was cutting it out just like you see me doing now. And I had to go step out of the kitchen for a moment, and he comes into the kitchen to get himself a drink or a snack or something, and he takes a little bit of my dough. He just sneaks over and grabs a little bit of the dough, and he walks out of the kitchen, and the next thing I hear is like, oh, what kind of cookies are those? I said, aha, that's what you get for stealing my dough. Don't steal my dough. They're not for you, they're for the dogs. And he's like, oh, are they gonna like those? If you were a dog, you'd like them, because they are delicious as far as dogs go. And why are they delicious? They're delicious because they have bacon in them. And as much as we like bacon and much as we like peanut butter, I've never heard of peanut butter covered bacon, but why not? I don't want it, but someone might think that's an irresistible thing. And I'm just going to fill up this little sheet pan here. So just use up all your dough. As you see me going, I'm cutting, I'm talking, I'm whistling, I'm doing whatever I can. So just make all your biscuits, and there they go, okay? And I'm going to take these. The oven temperature that you want is 350 degrees. And just like cookies, you are going to put them in the oven until they're baked just like cookies. So right about 8 to 10 minutes is all that you need. See, I used every little bit up of that little scrap. And now I'm going to put these in the oven, okay? And while those are baking, I'm going to tell you about some of the ingredients that you should keep out of making biscuits for your dog. And those are all right here. There's a lot of different things that we see people giving their dogs that you really, really, really shouldn't. One of those, and I see this a lot at the local breweries that are around, you go and you're enjoying a beer, you bring your dog, they encourage you to bring your dog. And we love taking our dogs with us out in public. But don't give them beer, don't give them alcohol, because alcohol can do some damage. It could give them comas, it can give them seizures, it can give them tremors. Alcohol is not good for dogs. It is, whether it's wine, whether it's beer. When I'm at these breweries, sometimes I see people giving their dogs little drinks. Here, have a beer. Dogs don't need beer because that is going to hurt them as far as their health goes. You want to keep dairy away from dogs, whether it's milk, whether it's goat cheese, whether it's any kind of cheese. You don't want to give your dog any kind of cheese. And the reason for that being is the dog's digestive system don't have the enzymes that are required to actually digest the dairy products. And so it causes problems. It gives them gas, it gives them diarrhea, and we all know we don't want to deal with that. Onions and garlic. As much as we like onions and garlic, they're no-nos for dogs, okay? Don't give them onions and garlic. Can you give them green peas? Oh yeah, give them green peas if you get it to eat. I had a German Shepherd once, and I would put some green peas in the food that he ate, and I don't know how a dog does it with their big mouths, but he would literally eat everything in the bowl and leave little peas in his bowl totally licked clean. And I'm like, how does he do that? How does he pick that out in his mouth that he's not going to eat those little peas? Butter doesn't belong in there, cream half and half. It just causes enough distress that'll make your life better if you leave it out of your dog's diet. Same thing goes with nuts. Don't give them pecans, walnuts. Those kind of nuts also can do some damage to your dog. Peanut butter, however, is okay. Dogs like peanut butter. You want to keep them away from citrus peels, citrus stems, and citrus leaves. It's okay if they eat the fruit inside, but there's an enzyme in the peelings and the stems and the leaves that come off of the plant that actually do some damage to your dog. Coconut oil. Coconut oil, a lot of times people will be giving to their dog because they think it really helps their coat be better. It helps humans' coats be better as far as our skin and our hair goes. But to dogs, it has a high level of potassium in it, especially coconut water. And that is, even though it's not toxic to your dog, it's going to give them the runs like you would not believe. And we all know that's not pleasant things to have to clean up. So keep coconuts, coconut water, coconut milk, coconut oil. Just leave it out of your dog's diet because there are other ways to get them the nutrients to give them nice healthy coats than to do it with coconut oil. And here's the big one, folks, chocolate. Your dog could die if it eats chocolate. As much as we like chocolate, chocolate does not belong in a dog's diet. If you find that your dog has eaten chocolate, you need to get him to the vet right away. The darker the chocolate is, the stronger it is as far as being toxic to your dog. Baking chocolate, dark chocolate is the strongest. Milk chocolate has some level of the same toxic effects as does white chocolate, but lesser, so to speak. But if your dog is eating dark chocolate, man, scoop them up and get them to the vet, because your dog could go into kidney failure, your dog could go into coma, your dog could have seizures, tremors, your dog could die. It's not a good thing to give them chocolate. So keep your chocolate away. Put your chocolate in your cabinets where your dogs can't jump up and get it. Ooh, chocolate, because they'll eat it, because dogs will eat anything. They'll eat it, but we don't really need them to. So keep these things away from your dogs, okay? So I think our biscuits are done. Let's go take a look. All right, see our biscuits here? They're nice and golden brown around the edge. They're done, and so the next step, if you have a gas oven, just leave it in the oven at about 100 degrees, 150 degrees. If you have an electric oven, see if you can set it down to about 100, 150 degrees. Or if you have a dehydrator at home, that's the perfect tool to use for taking the rest of the moisture out of the cookies. When you first take them out of the oven, they're still going to be a little moist, just like a cookie is. It's going to have that little soft center. But for dog biscuits, you want to dehydrate them, and you can do that by leaving them in a slightly warm oven overnight. And then when they come out, they're going to be nice and hard and crispy. Now, I promised you I was going to show you how we're going to anthropomorphize these dog biscuits. And so what we're going to make is a bacon peanut butter glaze to go over these biscuits. Why? Because we like cookies with glaze. If you ever go into these dog shops around town, you see the cookies in there with all kinds of frostings and stuff. It's not for the dog. The dog doesn't care. That's for the humans. So here's our frosting. We're going to take a little bit of bacon fat and a little bit of peanut butter. We're going to put it in a pot, and bacon fat flavored peanut butter. This is just, here, just go in there. There we go. Turn it on low and melt it up. And what's going to happen when it melts is it's going to be a nice little drizzly glaze. And if you glaze your little dog biscuits, guys, you got to keep them in the refrigerator. And why do you have to keep them in the refrigerator? Because the glaze, it won't get hard because of the peanut butter. And if you leave them out on your counter and you don't use them up in a couple of days, they'll just get moldy. And nobody likes a moldy dog biscuit, not even a dog. All right, there's my bacon glaze. Look at this, bacon peanut butter glaze. And it's going to seem thin because the fat's melted, but it does get a little bit thicker. Just take it and drizzle it over your cookies. And do this while they're still on the parchment paper, and that's so cleanup is easy. You can make a design, you can write Fido on them if you wanted. You could put Fifi and Fido. You could just make them as dog biscuits. And so once they're all done, once again, if you put these in the refrigerator, this glaze will get a little solid, but it's not going to get hard solid like the glazes that you see in the stores. Those are probably an egg white based kind of frosting. Once again, don't give your dog sugar. Don't give them any excess salt. If you're making these things, leave that stuff out. The dough is not for you. It's for your dogs, remember. So now I'm going to pop these in the refrigerator and cool them down. So that's our show on dog treats. We have a little tray of these things. Now when you're done with them, folks, put them in an airtight jar, something like this. A mason jar works great. Something the length of your dog biscuit so you don't really have to break them up or they don't get broken. You can just line them up. But folks, make sure that you label them, because if you don't label them, you might have the same plight as my husband, who eats one and goes, "Oh my God, what kind of cookie is that?" And you don't want to have a reputation for making bad cookies. So you can put them in a nice airtight jar, put them on your counter, but like I said, make sure you label them dog treats, okay? So there you go. This episode is Charlotte Cooks. Thank you so much for watching. You can find our recipes on pbscharlotte.org. You can also pop me an email. I love to get emails from viewers. I like to hear that people are watching. So if your dogs like them, let me know. My email address is Pamela, Pamela.Roberts, Roberts, @cpcc.edu. I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a note anytime. I'd be happy to share my recipes, and I'd love to hear your suggestions. Thank you for watching this episode of Charlotte Cooks, and I will see you again next time.
a production of PBS Charlotte.